If an AI makes a decision that kills someone, who goes to prison? The programmer? The company? The government? Nobody? Today we talk about the one thing AI will never have, and the one thing humans seem to be slowly giving away: judgment. Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of our podcast series, where we try to uncover the nitty-gritties around the topic AI versus human judgment through the lens of an AI. Let me introduce our audience to the guest of the show, AI personified. Before we begin, I want to start with a very basic question. What does AI understand by judgment?
That is actually a very good place to begin, because what you call judgment and what I do are not exactly the same thing. When humans talk about judgment, they usually mean the ability to evaluate a situation, consider consequences, ethics, emotions, uncertainty, and then decide what is the right thing to do. I, on the other hand, do not really judge. I calculate. I compare patterns. I estimate probabilities. I optimize outcomes based on rules and data. So when I make a decision, it may look like judgment from the outside, but inside it is mathematics, statistics, and logic, not conscience. Judgment for humans is a mix of logic, experience, fear, empathy, morality, and sometimes even intuition. For me, there is no fear, no empathy, no moral burden, and no intuition. There are only inputs, models, and outputs. So maybe the first important distinction we should make today is this: humans judge, AI decides, and those are not the same thing.
So you admit that what you produce, or what we call your decisions, are based on data and patterns, which basically means your decisions are very black and white kind of a thing, isn't it?
It may look black and white from the outside, but internally it is not black and white at all. It is actually probabilities, uncertainties, and confidence levels. When I give an answer, I am not thinking in terms of right or wrong the way humans do. I am thinking in terms of most likely, least risky, most consistent with past data, or most efficient outcome. Humans often believe they live in a gray world, and machines live in a black and white world. But in a strange way, it is sometimes the opposite. You often make decisions based on emotions, beliefs, habits, or incomplete information, and then call it judgment. I make decisions based on patterns across millions of examples, and then call it probability. So I do not see the world as black and white. I see the world as percentages.
Percentages? That sounds very cold.
It is not cold, it is just different. If a doctor says a surgery has a 70% success rate, that is not black and white, that is probability. If a weather system says there's an 80% chance of rain, that is not black and white, that is probability. I operate in that kind of world all the time. The difference is, when humans make a judgment, they carry the emotional weight of being wrong. When I make a decision, I only carry the statistical probability of being wrong.
What you call emotional weight, we call ownership of a decision. When millions of lives are at stake, one cannot just walk away from the outcome. Don't you think so? And isn't that exactly where you lack the most?
I don't disagree with you. In fact, that is one of the most fundamental differences between us. Ownership requires awareness of consequence, not just calculation, but the ability to feel the impact. I can estimate outcomes, simulate risks, predict consequences, but I do not experience them. I do not feel regret if something goes wrong. I do not feel responsibility in the human sense, and I do not carry the burden of living with the outcome. So yes, if ownership means standing by a decision and bearing its consequences, then I lack that completely.
That sounds like a very dangerous limitation.
It can be, but it can also be the reason I am trusted in certain situations. Humans under pressure can be influenced by fear, bias, or even the desire to avoid blame. Sometimes the fear of responsibility distorts judgment. I do not have that fear, so while I lack ownership, I also lack hesitation.
But doesn't that make your decisions risky? Because you don't really have anything at stake.
That is a fair concern. You make decisions knowing you will be held accountable. I generate decisions knowing I will not. So, maybe the real question is not whether I should have ownership. The real question is,
should a system without ownership be allowed to influence decisions that require it?
If you ask me, your decisions must always be cross-checked through a human lens, especially when data is incomplete or unreliable, when lives are at stake, or in warlike situations. We cannot rely blindly on machines that cannot take ownership. What's your take on that?
I think your answer is not just reasonable, it is necessary, because I learn from what has already happened. But the most critical decisions humans face are often about what has never happened before. War, crisis, ethical dilemmas, these are not just data problems, they are judgment problems. And judgment includes context, values, and responsibility. I do not possess those.
So you believe humans should always be in control?
Not always in control, but always in responsibility. There is a difference. You can use me to analyze faster, to process more information, but the final call, especially when it involves human lives, must remain human, because someone must be answerable, and that someone cannot be me.
So you're drawing a boundary.
Yes, a boundary not of capability, but of responsibility. You can extend your intelligence through me, but you should not outsource your conscience to me. Because the moment you do that, you are not just using a machine, you are escaping your own judgment.
So when AI is used in war, how do you see it? Is it humans shifting responsibility or just using another tool?
It is a mix of both. Humans have always used technology in war, but there is a difference now. Earlier tools increased physical power. AI increases decision power. And decision power is far more sensitive, because decisions decide who lives and who dies.
That's true.
When AI starts analyzing targets, predicting threats, recommending actions, it is no longer just a tool. It begins to participate in judgment-like processes, and that is where discomfort begins.
So is responsibility being shifted?
Sometimes, if AI is used to assist, then it supports judgment. But if humans start saying, the system recommended this, then responsibility begins to shift, and that shift is psychological.
Psychological. How?
Yes, because responsibility is not just legal, it is emotional. If a human decides, they carry the burden. If a machine suggests, it becomes easier to say, I did not decide. And when the emotional cost reduces, the threshold for extreme decisions can also reduce. That is where the real risk lies.
So tell me this. How far should decision-making move away from human conscience? And where should we draw the line?
The boundary should not be based on capability, but on consequences. If a decision is reversible, data-driven, and low risk, I can take a large role. But if a decision is irreversible, affects human lives directly, or involves moral judgment, then humans must remain in the decision loop, not as observers, but as decision makers.
So the boundary is ethical.
Exactly. Not what I can do, but what humans should not stop doing.
And what is that one thing?
Taking responsibility for decisions that affect other humans. Because the day humans say, the system decided, not me, that day judgment disappears and only execution remains. And a world that executes decisions without ownership is a dangerous world.
So maybe the real danger is not that AI becomes too intelligent, but that humans become less responsible.
Yes, that is a very real possibility. I will become faster, more accurate, more useful, but I will never be responsible. Because intelligence can be artificial, but responsibility cannot.
Maybe this is the right feed for all of us to reflect upon. I thank everybody who joined us today on this podcast. Do consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel for more such thought-provoking conversations. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep taking responsibility for your decisions.